when a young orphan shadows rap legend Eminem. Their worlds collide in ways neither could have imagined. Brace yourself, what unfolds next will leave you breathless and warm your heart. The streets of Detroit hummed with life on a crisp Saturday morning. Amidst the bustling crowd, 7-year-old Jamal Harrison walked alone. His small frame weaved through the throngs of people, unnoticed and unremarkable to most passers-by. Jamal's life had been a series of temporary homes and fleeting connections since he lost his parents 4 years ago. The foster care system had shuffled him from one family to another, each placement feeling less like a home than the last. Today, like many Saturdays, he had slipped out of his current foster home unnoticed, seeking solace in the familiar chaos of the city streets. As he walked, Jamal's lips moved silently, practicing the rapid-fire lyrics he'd been trying to master for weeks. Ever since Darius, one of the older boys in his previous foster home, had introduced him to Eminem's music, Jamal had been obsessed. He'd spent hours listening to the same tracks over and over, trying to mimic the lightning-fast delivery and intricate wordplay that made Eminem a legend. For Jamal, Eminem wasn't just a rapper, he was an idol, a beacon of hope. Here was someone who had faced adversity, who knew what it was like to struggle, and who had risen above it all through the power of his words. Jamal dreamed of doing the same, of finding his voice and using it to escape the cycle of foster homes and uncertainty. As he wandered, a commotion up ahead caught his attention. A small crowd had gathered, their excited whispers carrying on the breeze. Jamal's curiosity got the better of him, and he edged closer to see what was happening. That's when he saw him, Eminem. The very man whose lyrics Jamal had been practicing moments ago was there in the flesh. The artist was dressed in his trademark black attire, a cap pulled low over his eyes. He was walking down the street, a camera crew backing up in front of him, clearly in the middle of shooting a music video. Jamal's heart raced. He had listened to Eminem's music religiously, and now here was his idol just feet away. Without conscious thought, Jamal's feet began to move. He trailed behind the film crew, careful to stay out of their way, but unwilling to let Eminem out of his sight. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and he was determined to make the most of it. As the crew moved down the block, Jamal followed at a distance. He watched in awe as Eminem performed take after take, his presence commanding and his words flowing with the speed and precision Jamal had tried so hard to emulate. Each verse, each perfectly timed syllable left him more amazed than before. At one point, Eminem glanced in his direction and gave a casual wave. Jamal's heart nearly stopped. Had his hero noticed him? The moment passed quickly as the rapper turned his attention back to the camera, but it left the little boy buzzing with excitement. The shoot continued, moving further down the street. Jamal kept pace, his earlier aimless wandering now filled with purpose. He barely noticed the hours slipping by, entranced by the process of creating the music video. In his mind, he imagined himself in Eminem's place, spitting rhymes with the same skill and confidence. As the day wore on, Jamal began to notice Eminem glancing in his direction more frequently. There was a curiosity in the rapper's eyes, a hint of recognition that someone had been following the shoot all day. Jamal felt a mix of excitement and nervousness building in his chest. Finally, during a break in filming, Eminem broke away from the crew. To Jamal's amazement, the rapper started walking directly towards him. The boy froze, his heart pounding so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. Eminem crouched down to Jamal's eye level, a friendly smile on his face. "Hey, little man," he said, his voice kind. "I've seen you following us all day. What's your name?" Jamal swallowed hard, barely able to believe this was happening. Here he was, face to face with the man whose words he'd been practicing for months, the artist he dreamed of becoming. "I'm Jamal," he managed to stammer out. "Nice to meet you, Jamal. I'm Marshall, but I guess you already knew that." Eminem grinned, trying to put the boy at ease. As Jamal nodded eagerly, he couldn't help but feel that this moment was the beginning of something big. "You came out here to support me, right?" the rapper asked, and the boy nodded again. Eminem gave him a fist bump and continued, "Do you want an autograph?" Jamal eagerly agreed. Eminem took a selfie with him, and handed over a signed shirt. As he waved goodbye, he noticed Jamal hesitating. That's when he realized there seemed to be no parent waiting for him nearby. "Won't your folks be worried? Where do you live?" Eminem inquired. The questions caught Jamal off guard, stirring up a whirlwind of emotions and memories. His mind raced back through the past 4 years, a blur of different homes and faces. He thought about his current foster family, wondering if they'd even noticed he was gone. "I live in Brightmoor," he stammered, referring to the neighborhood known for its challenges, with a foster family. "They probably haven't noticed I'm out." As the words left his mouth, Jamal felt a pang of guilt mixed with a strange sense of relief. It was the first time he'd admitted out loud to a stranger that he was a foster kid, and to have that stranger be Eminem of all people made the moment surreal. The rapper's eyebrows furrowed, a flicker of recognition passing through his eyes. He knew Brightmoor well, and the mention of foster care struck a chord with him. "Foster family, ha," he said softly. "That must be tough. How long have you been in the system?" The gentle probe opened a floodgate of memories for Jamal. He remembered the day he lost his parents in a tragic car accident, the confusion and pain that no 3-year-old should ever have to experience. Since then, life had been a revolving door of foster homes, each one promising stability, but ultimately falling short. So Jamal, Eminem's voice brought him back to the present. "What did you want to become when you grow up?" Jamal's mouth went dry. He had dreamed of this moment, but now that it was here, he found himself at a loss for words. "I love your music," he finally managed to say. "I've been practicing rapping like you, so I can be like you." Eminem's eyebrows raised, a mix of surprise and interest crossing his face. "Oh yeah, that's cool, man." Just then, the director of the music video informed Eminem they were done with the scene and would continue the rest indoors as planned. Knowing that he had to leave his new acquaintance, Jamal felt his heart break. He was just getting to know his idol, and Eminem seemed genuinely interested in him. But since the rapper still had a few moments before he had to leave, he began walking with Jamal, listening intently to his story. As they strolled through the streets of Detroit, the young orphan opened up about his life in the foster care system. He told Eminem about the confusion and pain of losing his parents at such a young age and how he'd been bounced from one foster home to another. Eminem listened attentively, his own difficult childhood resonating with Jamal's experiences. As they talked, Jamal's mind wandered to Miss Thompson, his social worker. She was one of the few constants in his life, always trying her best to find him a good placement. Her kind eyes and gentle demeanor were a stark contrast to the harsh realities of the foster care system. "There's this lady, Miss Thompson," Jamal found himself saying. "She's my social worker. She tries to help, but..." Eminem nodded understandingly. Sometimes even when people want to help, the system makes it hard, right? Jamal nodded vigorously, surprised and relieved that Eminem seemed to get it. "Yeah, exactly. She's nice, but she can't really change things." As they continued to talk, Jamal thought about Darius, his foster brother from a previous home. Darius was the one who had introduced him to Eminem's music, showing him how to use rhythm and rhyme as an outlet for his feelings. "My foster brother showed me your music," he said, his eyes lighting up. "He taught me how to rap some of your songs. I've been practicing ever since." A smile spread across Eminem's face. "That's dope, man. Music can be a powerful thing, you know. It can help you get through some tough times." Jamal nodded enthusiastically. "That's why I love it. When I rap, I forget about all the bad stuff for a while." Eminem's expression turned thoughtful. He recognized something in this kid, a spark, a hunger that reminded him of his younger self. "Hey, why don't you show me what you got? Spit a few bars for me." Jamal's eyes widened, a mix of excitement and terror coursing through him. This was his chance to impress his idol, but what if he messed up? Taking a deep breath, he decided to go for it. He launched into the first verse of "Lose Yourself," his words coming fast and clear, just like he'd practiced countless times before. As Jamal rapped, Eminem watched with growing amazement. The kid's flow was impressive for his age, and there was a raw emotion in his delivery that couldn't be taught. When Jamal finished, slightly out of breath, but grinning from ear to ear, Eminem gave him an approving nod. "Not bad at all, little man. You got some serious potential there." Jamal beamed at the praise, his chest swelling with pride. For the first time in years, he felt truly seen and appreciated for who he was and what he could do. As they continued walking, Eminem noticed Jamal's fatigue. Without hesitation, he picked the boy up and carried him, allowing their conversation to flow more easily. Jamal felt a sense of safety he hadn't experienced in years. Time seemed to fly by, and before they knew it, they were getting into a car, with Jamal directing them to his foster home. The ride was filled with more stories, and Eminem even freestyled a few lines with Jamal, encouraging the boy's passion for music. The SUV eventually came to a stop in front of a small, well-kept house with peeling paint and a neatly mowed lawn. Flower pots lined the porch, adding splashes of color to the faded siding. As they got out of the car, the front door opened, and a woman stepped out onto the porch. Mrs. Johnson was a short, plump woman with kind eyes and worry lines etched deeply into her face. Her eyes widened in disbelief as she saw who was accompanying her foster son. She hurried down the porch steps, wiping her hands nervously on her apron. "Jamal, honey, are you okay?" she called out, her voice a mix of concern and awe. "I'm fine, Mrs. Johnson," Jamal replied, a hint of pride in his voice. "This is Marshall. He helped me out today." Eminem stepped forward, extending his hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, ma'am. Jamal's a great kid." As Mrs. Johnson shook his hand, still looking somewhat dazed, movement caught Eminem's eye. Peering out from behind the screen door were several curious faces, Jamal's foster siblings, no doubt. Their eyes were wide with a mix of excitement and disbelief. Mrs. Johnson, noticing Eminem's gaze, turned and beckoned to the children. "Come on out and say hello," she called. Slowly, cautiously, the children emerged from the house, forming a small semicircle behind Mrs. Johnson. Eminem spent some time chatting with the family, his easy manner helping to dispel the initial awkwardness. He asked about each child, showing genuine interest in their lives and dreams. As the conversation flowed, the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the yard. Finally, Eminem knew it was time for him to leave. He turned to Jamal, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "I've got to head out now, but I want you to know something. You got talent, kid. Don't let anyone tell you differently. I'll make sure to visit whenever I'm in the neighborhood." "Okay." Jamal nodded, his eyes shining with a mix of gratitude and hope. But as Eminem was about to turn away, he noticed a change in the atmosphere. Mrs. Johnson's face had fallen, her earlier warmth replaced by a look of resigned sadness. "Is everything all right, ma'am?" Eminem asked, concern evident in his voice. Mrs. Johnson sighed heavily, her eyes darting to Jamal before meeting Eminem's gaze. "I'm afraid we've just received some news," she said, her voice heavy with regret. "Jamal is being moved to a different home." The words hung in the air, their weight palpable. Eminem looked at Jamal, watching as the boy's expression crumbled, tears welling up in his eyes. The other foster children shifted uncomfortably, their own eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Why?" Eminem asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "He seems happy here." Mrs. Johnson wrung her hands, clearly distressed. "It's complicated," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "Jamal needs regular therapy for his ADHD, but the stipend to afford it isn't forthcoming. It's important for him, and he needs consistent care. They've made provisions for him to move to a place where the stipend is regular to help him get the necessary therapy." Eminem felt a pain in his heart. He knew all too well how important stability was for a child, especially when dealing with ADHD. He looked at Jamal, saw the pain and fear in the boy's eyes, and made a decision. "How much would it cost," he asked, his voice firm, "to get Jamal the therapy he needs here in this neighborhood?" Mrs. Johnson blinked, surprised by the question. Without a word, she hurried into the house, returning moments later with a small white card. "This is Dr. Simmons," she explained, handing the card to Eminem. "She's been trying to help Jamal, but without regular sessions, it's been difficult. She can provide all the necessary details about the therapy and costs." Eminem took the card, turning it over in his hands as his mind raced with possibilities. He looked at Jamal, at the hope beginning to dawn in the boy's eyes, and he knew he couldn't walk away. "I'll get in touch with her," he promised, his voice filled with determination. "Maybe we can figure something out." As he prepared to leave, Jamal suddenly rushed forward, wrapping his arms around Eminem in a tight hug. "Thank you," the boy whispered, his voice choked with emotion. The rapper hugged him back, feeling a connection he couldn't quite explain but knew was important. As he walked back to his car, Eminem's mind was already formulating a plan. He didn't know exactly how, but he was determined to help Jamal and his foster family. Sometimes, he mused, the most unexpected encounters could lead to the most profound changes. As he drove away, watching the small house recede in his rearview mirror, he knew that this was just the beginning of something truly special. 2 days later, just as Jamal and his foster siblings were getting ready for school, a sleek black car pulled up outside their home. The driver, a friendly man named Tom, introduced himself as Eminem's assistant. "Good morning, everyone," Tom said with a warm smile. "I'm here to give you all a ride to school today, and I have some exciting news for Jamal." The foster kids gathered around, their faces a mix of curiosity and excitement. Tom handed Jamal an envelope. "Everything has been sorted out for your therapy, Jamal. You have your first session scheduled for today after school. Marshall has arranged for regular sessions with Dr. Simmons right there in the neighborhood. He's only asking for one thing in return: that you don't tell anyone what he's doing. He's a very private person and wouldn't like the publicity." Jamal's eyes widened in disbelief. He opened the envelope with trembling hands to find a handwritten note from his hero, along with details of his therapy schedule. Mrs. Johnson, who had been watching from the doorway, burst into tears of joy. "I can't believe it," she said, hugging Jamal. "You can stay with us now." Tom then proceeded to hand out bags filled with goodies to all the foster kids. There were signed CDs, T-shirts, and even some new school supplies for Jamal. There was also a brand new notebook with a note that read, "For your rhymes. Keep writing, keep dreaming. Eminem." As the foster kids piled into the car, their faces beaming with excitement, Jamal clutched the notebook to his chest, feeling a warmth he hadn't experienced in years. The ride to school was filled with chatter and laughter, a stark contrast to the usual quiet morning. In the days and weeks that followed, Jamal's life took a remarkable turn. With regular therapy sessions with Dr. Simmons and the unwavering support of his foster family, he began to thrive. His ADHD symptoms became more manageable, and his grades started to improve. Mrs. Johnson noticed a significant change in his behavior. He was more focused, less agitated, and smiled more often. Eminem's kindness had not only changed Jamal's life, but had touched an entire family. Proof that compassion can break through even the toughest barriers. Have you ever experienced an act of kindness that changed your life? Share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more heartwarming tales of unexpected heroes.